Every week on the show, we get to sit down with people who are shaping the way we work, the way we live, and the way we think. And today's guest is someone who helps us make sense of the world that seems to be speeding up faster and faster, almost exponentially. And I say that deliberately because Azeem Azhar, our guest today, wrote a book not too long ago called Exponentially. And I'd love to start there, Azeem. I know we chatted briefly to find out that you're in London, and I'm not. I'm here in New York. And but you work all over the world, as is increasingly the requirement in this exponential world. But why exponential and why the book?
Thank you. It's fantastic to talk to you. It's fantastic to hear that great New York accent when I'm surrounded.
No, are you implying that I have a New
No,
York
you have
accent?
a Boston accent. You have a Boston accent, Jim.
I wish.
Definitely get a hint of something there. But, you know, over the last 50 years, in fact, since I was born, the world has, unbeknownst to most of us, moved at an exponential clock speed, that clock speed being Moore's law, the computers getting faster and better every year. I remember the very first digital watch that I saw on a friend of my dad's, and he had to hold it up like this and press a button, and these red LEDs flickered on for a second, and then you could see the time, and it was probably wrong. And here we are 50 years later. It's not a long time. It's not even a lifetime. And these things connect to satellites and GPS, and they tell us our blood pressure, and they can receive email and browse the web and buy tickets, buy flowers. It is a remarkable set of changes in what is quite a short period of time.
So age-wise, it seems to me, Azeem, that you grew up digitally.
I grew up, I was five when Star Wars was released in 1977. So I was I've had a computer since the age of 9, but it was very much an analog world. It was a world of a few channels on the television, no DVDs, no CDs. We didn't even have a VCR for many years. So I'm one of that generation that we grew up with it in our culture and our media. Buck Rogers, Space 1999, Star Trek.
Sure.
And then we grew into it during our high school and university years.
And did you grow up in London?
I didn't grow up in London. I grew up in Zambia, in the southern end of Africa, where my dad was working. But it was in Zambia that I saw my first computer, probably in 1978 or 79, when my next door neighbor managed to find one on his travels to Asia and assembled it in our house next door. You know, it drove a black and white TV screen, and maybe we played Pong on it. Or maybe that's just a false memory that I've held on to.
And education?
I studied in the UK, so we moved to the UK again a really epochal moment. So Margaret Thatcher had just taken over, was bringing supply side thinking to the country, and we landed in that environment. And after going to a boarding school, I studied at Oxford, and I actually, funnily enough, I studied a degree called PPE, which is Politics, Philosophy, and Economics. But I was a bit misplaced. I was really obsessed with the computers. So I was also the only person sitting with physicists learning how to program in a language called C++, which was, I was never as good as the physicists, I can tell you that much.
But what a journey and what an education.
It is an amazing journey. I think my parents' journey, though, is much more emblematic of the key shifts of the 20th century, because they were both born in relatively rural communities. They moved to a big city, the city of Lahore, which was just in Pakistan. That migration, that move, happened at the end of decolonialization, when India and Pakistan became independent from the UK. They then formed part of global migration as high talent migration. So my dad came to the UK to finish his graduate studies. And so they saw these three major waves that in some sense defined a lot of the 20th century: rural to urban, decolonialization, and high skill talent global migration. And that is a much bigger journey than anything I have been on or indeed will be on.
Yes. So fast forward a little bit, if you would, and when your children are talking about your journey, how will they describe it? Sounds to me that you've had two legs of that so far.
Yes, I've had the move from living abroad, being born abroad, and coming to the UK. I think they know that that is a part of my story. I think we really do get shaped by those first 7 to 10 years, and then I think they will definitely uh, make fun of my university experience. I had such an amazing time at Oxford, and really, uh,
Make fun?
yeah, because there are a lot of people in in the UK who were peers of mine who are now running the big companies, or they're well known, or they've been running the country probably badly, I would say. Uh, Liz Truss, who was a prime minister, was 2 years below me in my college, and then I think they will talk about the story of the technology and the story of exponential, the fact that it's a word that in fact, I learned from my mum when I was about 10, and it is a word that is the business that I run, which is Exponential View. It's the book that I've written, the first book. It's the TV series as well, and it is the it's the analytic framework by which I think I've been able to contribute a little bit to the way people understand the world.
I had a conversation last year with a friend who's at Microsoft, and he runs a lot of their AI product. And he warned me a year ago, saying, Jim, you have thousands of people in the flowers companies. Be prepared, and your children were born digital or became digital, yes. I certainly wasn't. But he warned about companies that are going to be born AI native and how they'll be able to do everything we do with thousands of people with 5% of that headcount, not 5% less. And I'm seeing that bear out. He tracks a few dozen companies that are AI native companies. He's tracking a staffing company that has a total of one employee, and it's billing millions a month. A law firm that has one employee, it's billing several $1,000,000 a month. Driving regulators crazy because who is licensed? And it's a state by state situation here. So your children have a chance to be AI native or AI adaptive. And how do you think their worlds will be different? How do you influence their education so as to be properly prepared for that? We've been chatting here a bunch about the fact that young people who are graduating from university college here in the U.S. now having a very difficult time finding entry-level positions. And when I ask how many courses, AI courses did they take, and the answer is one or none because they weren't available. Those kids are ill-prepared for the world they're trying to enter. So how do you counsel them, and how do you prepare your children to be able to navigate an AI native world?
I think it's really tough for the cohort that you just talked about. They get caught just as the music
In
was
between.
in between, just as the music was changing, and they're also in a situation where there's a great deal of economic uncertainty about inflation, about how strong the US economy really is. And if you're a hiring manager, it's expensive to hire a young person because it's a long-term commitment. It's like giving your child a
And
puppy. They have to keep it for life.
and in some cases, it's clear that what you're hiring them to do is soon to be done automatically.
In some cases, that'll be the case. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot we don't know. So we don't know how sustainable the one person legal shop will be over time, or the one person
Mm-hmm.
staffing shop. And so what do you do if you're going to go into an environment that is uncertain and unstable, uh, and it's not going to be clear which direction things are going to go? You have to signal adaptability, and you have to signal resourcefulness, as well as some skill to potential employers, and how do you go about doing that? Because I don't think that colleges necessarily have courses could have courses in that. I mean, I think to
They don't have the people to teach them.
well, they may not have the people to teach them either. So one of the big binds is that you can de-risk yourself as a candidate if you have work experience, but of course you can't get the work experience until you've had the work experience. So things that I think may start to be good signifiers would be taking on a project of some sort that you can deliver end to end, because when you do that
Outside of the school setting or while you're in the school
or
setting?
while you're in school or outside the school setting, but something that has
So it could be a social involvement. It could be a club that you're involved with at school. It could be something you do for a small business in your community that you got to know.
exactly. I think the kinds of for example, if you were friends with the local barber, which I am friends with the local barber, and I went and said, okay, I will help you. I will help you build up your customer relationship system so you can send text messages and emails, and I will get that running, and I will check that customers like that. And I've never done this before, and I'm going to have to read the manuals, but I will get that project running over 8, 10, 12 weeks. What that does is it gives you that sense of commercial experience. Like what is life like when you're outside of the academy, when you put these skills to the test in the real world? Some kind of end-to-end project is a really good
I
signal.
love that idea. That is really, really good advice because it's something that you could say it's related to coursework you're doing in school, but it also has. I talk all the time about the word resume isn't really a noun anymore; it's a verb. And there's an example of you're advising someone to resume, to be doing things that they can put on their CV, on their resume, that indicates what kind of a person they have, where they chose to spend their time. And we're always looking for balance, but we're looking for curiosity, we're looking for interest, we're looking for people who did something that you go, oh, that's interesting, and that's interesting.
And that's interesting. Just the idea that they might have had to call up the technical support for the text messaging company to say, I can't get this to work, and have to speak to a person to figure it out or discuss a contract is so much. It's just an additional layer on top of having studied a commerce course or a microeconomics course or whatever it was. So I think that idea of demonstrating that you can take a project end to end becomes really, really important. And the other thing I think you have to do is you do have to show some nuanced ability to use AI. I mean, we are just hiring at the moment, and in the hiring discussions, we do ask people how to use AI, and when they go and do their take-home task, our fourth question is, please explain to us how you used AI to do this, what the most effective thing it helped you with, and where you disregarded its advice. Because we assume that people will use ChatGPT. We assume that. We want them to.
Foolish if they don't.
Foolish if they don't. Yeah.
Kick off the year with wellness goals you'll actually enjoy, like eating more seafood and cooking at home. You'll love the fresh caught flavor and effortless ease of our recipe kits, entrees, and time-saving dinners. We have a CEO. We finally fired this old guy back earlier this year and hired a really qualified CEO.
He's gone into entertainment, I hear.
Hardly. And what he does something clever, which is people come to him with a situation they're dealing with. His question is, when you research this using ChatGPT or whichever AI platform you're using, LLM, how did it respond? What suggestions did it give you? Why did you choose? Why didn't you come to an answer yet? So he's forcing people to say, before you come to me, make sure you've done your work. Mm-hmm. And your work now for everybody includes using these large language models and using the right large language model that is most effective for that particular situation.
Right. So that's a great idea. And then my question is, how does
It's very similar to what you do with prospective hires.
Yeah, and we do something similarly internally in the team, and I will often ask people to get them to show me their prompts and show you the prompts I've used. What I've discovered is that having had much more managerial experience than them, there are often aspects that I will emphasize that they might not, or the LLM might not emphasize. But I think that the question there is, how does that evolve, because the tools get so much better uh, so quickly, and that is just not static knowledge. It's not like double entry bookkeeping. It is really, really dynamic and quite
It's
disruptive.
almost exponential.
It is in fact exponential, I would say. Yeah. So
So,
can I ask, how does your new CEO himself, with his entire set of responsibilities to all the people in the company, to all of your suppliers and all of your customers, how does he uh, make sure that he's satisfied with his level of knowledge?
I would guess that he's ahead of the curve on the knowledge. I think one of the things that attracted me to him and the board to him was the fact that his career experiences included, he's from Mexico, and he went to school to become a chemical engineer, did that for 5 years in Mexico, then migrated to the U.S., went to the Yale School of Management for his MBA, and then worked in the consulting world for a dozen years, 13 years, I think. That rigor of working, he was at McKinsey, that rigor of the consulting world forces you to use the newest technologies all the time. You're in an environment where the new inputs are coming all the time. So I was attracted to that discipline, that rigor, that breadth of inputs, and being able to manage those for an outcome. And then he went and worked at a very large retailer here in the U.S. called Home Depot, and he was a star there in terms of he was their CMO, and he built their .com business to enormous size. So I think he's a fellow who understands that technology is always going to be changing, and your first order of business is to make sure what those changes are and how they might influence how we do our work. So I asked him just a few weeks ago. I said, Adolfo, we meet weekly, and every time he comes to a meeting, I'm still analog. I still have a pad and a pen all the time, even though I try all day to use technology, and I think I'm okay at it. But he comes to our meetings, and he always has a deck. And finally I said to him, Adolfo, how do you do this? And so he said, let me show you. He says, when I'm flying here, I put in all of my bullet points of what I'd like to talk to Jim about. And then I asked ChatGPT to rank them. Which ones did I cover last week that it's just an add-on to that conversation? Graph where you can our progress on that. So he took me through the process. So our session last was him tutoring me to do what he does,
Right.
to use the tools today to be more efficient and make our time together better spent.
I mean, I recognize that is a very similar process to the way that my team works. So starting, Jim, I'm holding up, if people are listening, my leather notebook and my fountain pen, which I keep at my desk, and also the pot of fountain pen ink, which I'm also now holding up.
No, you're really old school.
So I work in pen and paper a lot in two ways. Sketch and prototype, sometimes it's just the fastest, and
Yes.
deep work. So every week for at least 2 hours, sometimes longer, the phones are off, the computer is off, and I'm with my fountain pen on sheets of paper. And my fountain pen doesn't have an ink cartridge in it. I dip it into the ink every 15 or 20 words to slow me
And
down.
I was going to ask, is that just to slow you down? Is that your regimen?
Yeah, it's to slow me down. It's to make me get into a tactile, visceral habit where I'm using the haptic and I'm feeling what I'm writing and what I'm thinking about. And that part of the work it's really important. It's often where what a financier would call the alpha comes from, when I'm
Mm.
sitting there and I'm just allowing my brain to get into its space. And as I said, I try to build at least a couple of hours a week in the work week into that, sometimes more.
Azeem, I find the pen on paper, and I always have a pad with me. I always have a notepad with me because I get the idea. I just want to jot it down. So when I get to a stationary place late in the day, I can sort through my notes. This is important. This is a high priority. This should go on this list. And then when I'm done, I love tactilely tearing up the paper. I'm done with that. Uh, for me, it's how I grew up in an analog world, but it helps me to think. When I'm struggling with a problem, I need to use a pen and pad to say, okay, here are the issues, here are the opportunities. It's just how I think, and I take notes a lot when I'm chatting with you now. I'm taking notes because it's how I learn. The idea of writing something helps imprint it in my brain somehow.
Well, I think there is evidence now that just in the last few weeks, I saw a paper that had been peer reviewed showing that uh, if you look at the neural, if you look at blood flow of brains of people who write, they're showing higher levels of connectedness in parts of the brain that are important, and if you
And different parts of the brain.
and different parts of the brain. Yeah, and we think we know that building up those connections is important. I have a really simplistic analogy for why it's important to use all the tools. If you think about a great tennis player like Roger Federer or Novak Djokovic, they're not just on the court hitting backhands. They're also in the gym lifting weights, and they're doing yoga, and they're doing this, and they're learning how to meditate,
And they're eating properly.
and they're eating properly, because in order to oil that machine really well, you need to come at it at lots of different angles of attack and angles of care. And the same is true for the work that I do. That sometimes I will be on an extended back and forth with an LLM for an hour. Sometimes I will build a financial model in hand on a piece of on a piece of paper as a first sketch. What I'm endeavoring to do is, perhaps, as you say, just doing what I'm used to, or maybe it's becoming increasingly deliberate that I need to maintain a diversity in order to keep some level of optimum performance.
So well thought out. I am migrating to, like, if I know I'm going to be in a meeting, I now do take notes digitally too with a pen with a digital pen. So I'm migrating. But back when you asked me the question about Adolfo, you work with all different kinds of companies in all different sectors. How do you advise leaders to adapt and learn and make sure they're keeping up with the changes in technology? Besides contracting with you to help them.
Well, there's not much I can do. I mean, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? The light bulb has to want to change, and what all I tell them is, if you haven't had your oh shit moment using this technology, you need to get it, and
Mm-hmm.
you will only get it by immersing yourself, and that needs to be a minimum of 10 hours. Maybe I'll say 8 hours to some people and 16 hours to others. You need to sit there on your own and take yourself through the journey, and experiment for long enough that you get to that moment. And when you get to that moment, my hunch is that you realize what the capability is, and you start to be the Adolfo driving the best practices and the vision, and being willing to learn from the people around you as you as they develop their own skills. You really have to use the technologies yourself at an increasingly high level. You can't be taught this by McKinsey or by BCG. You can't really be taught it by you can't outsource it to a VP to
Yes.
do it for you. This is not like upgrading the finance software. This is something that is
Mm-hmm.
more fundamental to how the organization is going to operate, who's going to be valued, how your strategy will shift, who your customers will be, what you might do to your suppliers. I mean, everything is going to change, and the buck stops and starts with one person, which is the CEO.
Azim, what are the breadth of the things that you do in your company? You write, as is evidenced by your terrific book, Exponential. Uh, what other things do you do? I know you have the podcast. I know you have a newsletter. What else are the services and breadth of things that you do within your company?
At the heart, it's all the same thing. I want to listen to
It's
people.
content that manifests itself in different ways.
It's ideas. I want to listen to
Uh,
people. I want to sense what's going on in the world. I want to think quietly, and then I want to try and tie this all together to help guide people through this this period of uncertainty. So some of that comes out as essays in the newsletter. Some of it comes out in coaching boards or investment committees. Some of it might be distinct pieces of work for a management team or a leadership team. But it all revolves around the same heartland, which is uh, I've not got an axe to grind. I'm in love with trying to make sense of this, and I want to take as many signals that are useful as I can to think them through my own frameworks to hopefully say things that are useful and maybe things that are predictive and maybe things that help people make better decisions. But ultimately, the decisions are all yours and they're not mine.
Should every board of every company have someone on the board who is charged with being their seer, their question asker around how we're evolving and using technology? Is that a new role that's emerged on a board of governance, board of directors, that someone has a responsibility to be the question asker about how we're anticipating, embracing, and evolving and adapting to new technologies?
I hadn't thought about it the way you have just stated
Well,
it.
I think of a board as having two distinct responsibilities. Governance, that's easy. Check the boxes, make sure we're doing all the right things, making sure we're a proper company. And the second thing is strategy. That's easy to get lost. But within that strategy is the component I'm talking about now. The sense that we have to be the voice in the ear of the management, challenging them to make sure they're not getting comfortable with their technology stack today, knowing that in the world that you've just defined it exponentially, that it is, if you don't know it's changing, then you're really falling behind because it's constantly changing. So isn't that a part of that strategy requirement now to bring that rigorous inquiry?
I as I said, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I really agree with you that having somebody who can bring those questions and those themes to the table on a regular basis is really important. And it's not just about the speed of change of technology and AI. It's also about the other related shifts from levels of debt or demographics. And it's also critically about the second and third order shifts that a general purpose technology like AI will effect on our societies. As one example of that, ChatGPT is the most fastest growing product in history.
Software company.
Yeah, and it grew faster than even TikTok grew, and yet 75% of Americans think AI will be worse for them, according to the Edelman Trust Barometer. So you have this deep paradox. Now, my work, because I'm not exclusively a technologist, I'm a sort of systems analyst of economic and cultural themes as well, would raise that as a significant question for anyone who's got a big workforce or who serves consumers, which is how are you thinking and understanding about the risks that emerge through that split between people loving the technology and being relentlessly negative about it. And I don't.
Is it binary now, do you think?
I think there are a few people who might sit in the middle, but it's just a very confused place. 75% of Americans are pessimistic about AI, and about the same portion are using AI regularly. So there is a large overlap of people who both use it and feel that way.
Make a sweet gesture for moments big and small with delicious goodies from Cheryl's Cookies. With tempting treats and fantastic flavors to choose from, it's an easy way to brighten someone's day. So let's drill down on the part that you talked about in terms of your responsibilities as an economic and cultural scientist. And I sense a great deal of uncertainty in the workforce now about how is this going to impact them at every level. Because we've heard these predictions, we see them, the amazing capabilities. And I see people who I am a little bit surprised at, frankly, saying, well, I have a job a year from now.
Mm-hmm.
And it surprises me. So what are the cultural and what are the societal and then therefore political fallout from that? In the U.S., we just had, as you know, an election of a new mayor in New York City. We've seen the polarization. We've seen President Trump be able to galvanize and organize a group of people on this end of the spectrum, Mamdani and others like him on the other end of the spectrum. But they're all about polarizing people around their core beliefs and sometimes their fears. But there's this growing fear that hits both of those pools of people about this whole uncertainty. What are the consequences, and what are you advising your clients to think about and to do in the face of that uncertainty and that fear that's developing?
I mean, the consequences are really could be very, very significant. We just had one of the first local towns in the US reject a data center being built in their parish or their locale. That may start to increase. But I do think that
It certainly changed our outlook on nuclear energy.
well, in a heartbeat, right? And even in the UK, where we just had something shift today, so there's this incipient political risk, which is that people will want this less, they will rebel against it, and how it shows up in the political transmission mechanism, I'm not sure, because of course a large part of the US economy is being propelled right now by data center build out. So you've got this real complexity, and this complexity that the stock market matters a lot to the people in Washington, more than it perhaps has mattered to them for a long, long time. Uh, I think it's a really challenging risk for us to address. And when I talk to leadership teams, one of the things that I try to get them to do is engage in a broader and wider process of, ultimately, you've got the boss has now bought in to AI and its possibilities and its limitations. And Jim, I call this the croissant, like the French pastry. So the top of the C is the boss, and the rest of the C are the people who do the work, from technologists to frontline workers, and the importance to engage them in using these tools. So it's very different to the traditional, oh, we got Accenture or IBM to come in and build something for everyone to use. This is something where I think the importance of getting that buy-in is really essential, because when the hard questions get asked, if indeed you're not going to expand a business unit or you're going to shrink it, the sense that people had agency and were on that journey will make a difference at that moment to the conversation you have, to the way in which people feel that they could have participated in that in that process. And that is difficult, and it's expensive, and it's time consuming, especially in moments which are outside of a handful of companies, quite pressurized right now.
In the current days, a lot's being spoken about in terms of new subject, digital currencies.
Mm-hmm.
And they've taken a hit here, as maybe like they did back in 2022 or so. Your thought about digital currencies, but what I'd really like to hear as the second part of that is, I'd love a quick thought from you on how a prediction on how tokenization will change how we think about assets.
Well, digital currencies they've hung around, and they've in a way made it into the mainstream now. I mean, the big banks talk about them. The really interesting thing with digital currencies will be that as we move to an AI world, which will be about agents working on our behalf to fulfill business tasks, those agents will need to pay for the work they get done by other agents. They'll need to verify that work gets done. They will need to demonstrate back to us that it's been done. And that's where tokens, I think, will really start to come into their own. There will need to be a mechanism in the next 10 years which allows agents to collaborate on things and to exchange value in a trusted way. And I don't think they're going to do it by PayPaling or Venmoing $5 to each other. I think they will need to do it through some kind of token layer, which doesn't yet exist. And as that connects to tokenization of assets, the important point is that any part of the economy that doesn't have a tokenized reputation, which a representation, which is a secure digital representation, will need to engage with that through traditional rails, which might be much slower. They might not be accessible, and you might not want an agent to have access to something like that because you can't control the use of it the way you can if it will be on these native systems. But I don't know what those systems will end up being. I mean, people are looking at what that token economy will look like for agents. We are still a little way away from say, well, this is the actual tokens it will be, and this is who will operate them, and this is how they'll operate. We'll discover that in the next few years.
Well, that's a very tip of a whole long conversation that I look to enjoy with you in the future. Azeem, you've been so engaging to speak with. I can see why your book has been so popular, why your podcast is so popular, your newsletter and your consulting business, and why you're called upon all the time. You just have a way of being very direct and very insightful. And so I'll ask you one last question. Something that you would tell us as business leaders or family leaders, something that we should be prepared for in the next year that we might not have at the center of our radar screens right now?
Wow, that's a really, really tough question. It's really tough because there is a lot changing and there are a lot of shocks. They're really hard to predict. So let me answer it this way. The way that I prepare for things like that is I look at as a business person, I look at my decision loop. I look at how quickly I can make a decision, execute on the decision, see whether that decision works, and then orient myself and take another decision. And the reason that works in the face of uncertainty, in the face of shocks, is that if you're already always making decisions faster than any change or threat that's outside you, you will always be inside the turning circle of that threat. This is the lesson of the Top Gun Fighter Academy, which is, the OODA loop. Stay inside your enemy's turning circle. And so when I look out over a year or over 5 years, the thing that is in my mind is I've got some decisions that will just take a long time and they are what they are. But I have to have a series of decisions where I can essentially have a very tight decision loop and act and maybe get out of the way or steer towards if it's an opportunity.
Azeem Azhar, Exponential, congratulations on all your successes. Thank you for all you've done to help us see where we might be headed and to make sure we're prepared for the future. And thank you for helping me to make sure my grandchildren are properly prepared for the future. I think your children are very, very lucky.
Oh, Jim, it's really been my pleasure. Thank you so much.